What is up, everybody? RogersBase here, today with a very special presentation, direct actually from C2E2. I just presented this at C2E2 last week. I'm actually really proud of this because it's been a really long time since I did a One Piece theory video, and this is essentially like a catch-all, including a lot of the theories that I've had about the end of the series. There's going to be a lot of fun stuff in this. We're basically going to be going over what I think we're going to see in One Piece before the end of the series. And I do mean pretty much everything. I'm going to be going over all the major arcs that I think we're going to see before the end of the series, all of Oda's different plans, things that he's talked about in regards to the end of One Piece, and how I think that's going to relate to some of the upcoming story arcs, all that good stuff. So sit back, relax, get yourself a cup of coffee. This is going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to get started charting Oda's course to Laugh Tale. Now, the first thing we got to talk about right at the very beginning of this, if we're talking about the end of One Piece, is just when do I think One Piece will end? And the answer to this is very simple. The answer to this is never. One Piece will never end. It's going to live on in our hearts forever. But in actuality, I think it's actually going to end in late summer 2027 at the earliest, okay? I don't think it's going to end before summer 2027, but I do think there is a likelihood in which we could see the series ending by this point. But again, I put estimated minimum because I really do think there is absolutely, positively no way we don't get to summer 2027, considering all the major milestones that are going to happen that year. Now, you might be asking, okay, what are these major milestones? What do you think is going to happen in 2027? Well, I'm glad you asked. Over here, why 2027? Well, first and foremost, One Piece manga's 30th anniversary is going to be summer 2027, specifically chapter 1 released officially on July 19th, 1997. So again, I feel like July 19th, 2027 is absolutely going to be, especially considering it's a Monday, which is when the chapters officially release in Japan. That's going to be a One Piece chapter release date. I actually even think I know the exact chapter that's going to come out on that date. I think it's going to be chapter 1200. You know, we had the first 600 chapters of the series. I think we're going to get the second 600 chapters of the series. I think it's going to be a big reveal. I do think, again, we'll probably end up getting chapters past that point, but I really do think chapter 1200 is going to line up directly with July 19th, 2027, especially when you take into consideration breaks and a lot of other stuff that we're going to be diving into a little bit later. Now, keep in mind, 2027 is also the estimated release of One Piece manga volume 120. Considering the rate we're going right now, which is like 3 or 4 volumes per year, we're probably going to hit 120, which again is the exact second half mark of One Piece in 2027. You know, you had the first 60 volumes pre-time skip, the second 60 volumes post-time skip. That would be a nice little bookend to the series. But again, I do think we could, in fact, we probably will get past that point. But I do think volume 120 will be very near the end, or we will have some massive revelation in volume 120. And the last thing that's happening in 2027 is the estimated release, once again, of One Piece chapter 1200. Now, if you don't take any breaks into consideration at all, which is obviously silly because when I wrote this, we've already had 2 breaks since, and there's another one coming up, and it's Golden Week right now when I'm recording this on YouTube. So again, there's always breaks. Oda's going to have breaks. There's going to be holiday breaks. There's going to be breaks. But again, if you did not take breaks into consideration, if you just assumed that every single Sunday from now until chapter 1200 there would be a release, we would get there in summer 2026. So again, take the breaks into consideration. All right, we're going to talk a little bit more about this though. Let's move on. Another thing, all right? Oda is notorious for giving incorrect estimations, but Wano ending in the manga in 2022 lines up perfectly with the 30th anniversary in 2027. It is a solid 3 years worth of chapters that would estimate to about 5 years if you take the breaks in consideration. Again, this was a statement in July of 2022 around the end of Wano in which he said in the latest Oda and Aoyama interview, Oda reiterated that One Piece is scheduled, again, this is important, is scheduled to end in 5 years and has the ending of the series completely planned. Now again, him scheduling it to 2027 does not necessarily mean he's going to hit that. There will almost definitely be delays. He's working on a lot of projects, things like the One Piece live action. Again, take breaks into consideration, but they are already scheduling for 5 years from July 2022, which would be July 2027, which goes directly in line with the 30th anniversary. So I think if anything, right now they're actually scheduling the plans for the 30th anniversary, and that's actually what Oda's directly referring to here. But again, plans change, and I do think things will go a little bit longer than that, but we'll talk anyway. He also tells Aoyama, again, his personal goal would be to end the series in 3. And again, if you take no breaks into consideration, no breaks at all, about 3 years from where we are right now would land somewhere in like summer 2026 in terms of chapters. And actually, since this point, we're only 1 year away from that, right? 2025. Even if he's taking breaks into consideration here, it's still not exactly lining up. So I think this is actually the important thing to look at. 5 years from this comment in 2022, 2027, 30th anniversary. Now, let's continue. I actually put this slide together. Shout out, by the way, to James for the amazing Yamato L art. I love this. But a lot of people, I think, don't necessarily take into consideration that more often than not, Oda's estimations for when certain things are going to end are actually correct. Usually what ends up happening, though, is things get delayed beyond his control. Obviously, he has to take a break for something. He's working on a different project. Obviously, an editor might give a delay or something. There's any number of reasons as to why Oda doesn't hit one of his estimations. But Artur, Library of Ohara, put together this amazing chart, which you can actually go check out on his Twitter page, of all the different times that Oda said that One Piece would end. One other important thing I want to note, though, is that this specific comment right here was backed up by almost all his editors. So many people said, yeah, that is the plan. We are planning on having it in about like 5 years. A lot of people backed him up on this one, whereas normally Oda will say something, an editor will say something, and then it'll be like a minor offhand comment that gets translated a bunch of different ways. But this time around, towards the end of Wano Country, entering into the final saga, this got reiterated again and again and again. So just keep that in mind as we're going through some of this stuff. Now, let us continue. Now, I know what a lot of you are saying. You're saying there's no way that Oda can wrap up everything by then. There's just no way. You got the admirals over here going, choktomate. Absolutely not. There are too many loose ends and things left unexplained in the series, right? I mean, take a look at this chart. Look at all this stuff we got to get through still. Look at all these loose ends. Laugh Tale, Rox D. Zebek, Zoro versus Mihawk, the fight with Akainu, the Revolutionary Army versus the world government, the Moon, Eneru, the God Valley flashback, the Will of Defo reveal, Emu's fight, the Straw Hat Grand Fleet big moment that was teased a long time ago, Shanks, potentially the Davy back coming back, Crocodile's secret with Ivankov, the Blackbeard Pirates, Uruj showing up in a main arc, Loki and Big Mom, the Emerald City, potentially. I actually want to write that off immediately. We'll talk about that one in a little bit because that's the only one that I don't touch on. Versus the Cross Guild, everything, the Final Road Poneglyph. You can read this whole list for yourself, but again, there's so much that we have to get through before the end of the series. It seems nearly impossible to wrap up all of this in about 3 arcs leading up to the 30th anniversary in 2027, right? Well, I actually think there is a way that Oda can do it. There's a lot of overlapping things here. When you take a look at some of these things and how they connect with the stories that are coming up at large, I do feel genuinely that there is a possibility that all of this stuff could be wrapped up in 3 more arcs. Now again, 3 more arcs, considering the fact that Egghead has been super long as it is, 3 more arcs could take us well beyond 2027. But I do think that people also underestimate just how long certain story arcs are. And because now we're getting all this world building and all this other information that's happened in, Egghead and Wano and all these other really long story arcs, things that needed to be set up beforehand, you got to remember, now we're getting to the good stuff. If you're getting to those final arcs, it's not going to be discovering things. We're going to have things discovered by that point. I mean, even looking into the future, obviously we're not going to be talking about any spoilers or any leaked chapters or anything like that. I just want to put that out there, by the way, because I know the early spoilers are out for the next chapter. We're not going to be talking about that here. We're just going to be talking about the most recent chapter that came out this last Sunday. But again, even if you look at what's been happening in Egghead Island with this stuff with the Void Century, Vegapunk mentioning that the world is going to sink. There's a lot of stuff that's being set up literally right now that's probably going to give us answers to a lot of this. So we won't even necessarily need this when we go into some of these later arcs. So let me continue. Here we go. we have exactly 88 chapters until that fated One Piece chapter 1200 that we brought up earlier. Now, this was as of April 21st, which is right before I ended up doing this panel at C2E2. But obviously, there's been one more chapter since then, so we really got 87 chapters. But my point still stands for where we are right now. I just want to give you guys an idea of exactly how many chapters and how many stories 88 chapters could entail. So let me actually show you this real quick. How long is 88 chapters exactly? Well, the entirety of Impel Down, the entirety of the arc was 25 chapters, all of it. The entirety of Marineford was 31 chapters, all of it. The biggest war the world has ever seen up to this point was 31 chapters long. Obviously, you then had all the stuff with post-war as well. So again, the majority of the Marineford saga, the Summit War saga, the only thing this doesn't include is Amazon Lily. But even then, or I guess Sabaody too, that's technically counted as this too. But even Sabaody and Amazon Lily, if you combine both of those, Egghead's already longer than both of those story arcs. So really, take all that in consideration when you know we're already in the final saga. All of these arcs could fit within the time that we have left leading up to chapter 1200, which again, I think is going to be released around summer 2027 if we take breaks into consideration. And even with all of this, you could also throw in Little Garden. All of Little Garden fits in that time period as well. So the majority of the Marineford saga and Little Garden all fit into 88 chapters. Now, let's continue this. Let's take a look at the story sagas that we've had right now. East Blue was 100 chapters, Alabasta 117. We had 85 for Sky Island, 139 for Water 7, Thriller Bark. I'm not going to go through all these. You guys could read these on your own. But I think the one that's really important to note is that currently where we are in the final saga, right now, right, we're already 55 chapters in and 143 chapters away from 1,200. Okay, that brings us to 190 something, which is already, all right, longer than every single story saga we've had up until this point. So it's not like all of a sudden we're you know, by saying there's only like 88 chapters left, or we could wrap all this stuff up in 88 chapters. It's not like this isn't already going to be by far the longest story saga in all of One Piece up to this point. And just there's simply no way. Also, I just read something incorrectly. I'm sorry. Let me correct myself right now. When I wrote minimum 143 to 1,200, I meant that I know we're getting to 1,200 and there's already been 55 chapters. I understand that I wrote this incorrectly. I caught myself. I just wanted to catch myself and correct it right away. What I meant to say is we're 55 chapters into a story saga that is guaranteed to be at least 143. But we're probably going to go, again, beyond that, considering some of the things we're going to be talking about here. So just keep that in mind. But again, the only other one that rivals that are Dressrosa and Wano. And keep in mind, Dressrosa and Wano were notorious for having lots of chapters that gave us tons of world building information. Lots of flashbacks were packed into those arcs. And then in addition to all those flashbacks and all the world building and all those other fights and all those other characters they got introduced, I also feel like those two sagas in particular are the two that come up again and again and again when it comes to things feeling padded out and things not necessarily being paced correctly. And there's no way Oda's going to flounder this final saga. There's just simply no way. No way. So, anyway, let's talk about the final saga now. Let's talk about what arcs I think we're going to get before the end of the series and what I believe Oda's master plan is for the end of One Piece. But before we do that, we're going to do a little special game because I did this at C2E2 and I want to do something special for all the people who are watching this live at home right now too. And that is trivia time. So I actually reached out to a couple One Piece YouTubers who provided trivia. Thank you very much to the people I'm not going to spoil just yet. They're going to be asking some trivia questions, and then the first person who answers correctly in the chat is going to get a special prize. Now, what is that special prize? I haven't decided yet. We're going to find out a little bit later. But if you're the first one, and I see you're the first one in the live chat to answer these trivia questions correctly, I will be reaching out after this and sending you a prize of some sort. I'm not sure what it will be, but some type of prize. So, with all that being said, let's get right into the first one. Let me turn my audio on so you guys can hear him. And here we go.
Hello C2E2, my name is Sai, and I hail from the One Piece YouTube channel, SYV. First off, thank you for attending this panel, and major thanks to RogersBase for allowing me to participate in this event. Now, secondly, It's trivia time. So my question to you guys is actually based off of an old David Carter data book. I'm not too sure which one. And the question is, what epithet did Oda consider for Mihawk before dubbing him Hawkeye?
There you go. You heard the man. What was the epithet that Mihawk was going to be named before eventually dubbing him Hawkeye? We already got the answer immediately in the chat. OG Fourth Gear answered clairvoyant, and as you will see, that is correct.
Okay, so you could cut this part out, but the answer is clairvoyant. It is the clairvoyant Mihawk, which is kind of cursed, to be honest. I think Hawkeye's is a lot better. Honestly, even Marine Hunter is better than that. Clairvoyant carries no aura whatsoever, man. Hello, C2E2. My name is...
I actually like the name Clairvoyant, to be honest. I think Clairvoyant Mihawk would have been cool. But I do think Hawkeye is better. Now, with that being said, let's go into the first story arc that I think we are most definitely going to see before the end of the final saga. This is a very obvious one. This is one that I feel like everybody's talking about. They've already directly referenced this in the story. Like, we're going here next. There's not a question. And that is the Elbaf arc. Now, what I did, as you'll notice, is I put a lot of stuff together on this image. Now, some of you eagle-eyed viewers might notice a couple things. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff in regards to the Elbaf arc. But before we dive a little bit deeper into it, I do want to go over some of the talking points of things that I specifically think we are going to see during this story arc. So, here we go. First off, Elbaf speculation. The first thing I think that's very obvious to expect when looking at what the Elbaf arc is going to entail is there's going to be a lot of Norse mythology, a lot of Viking stuff, and a lot of sun god lore. Again, the giants worship the sun god. We saw this in Big Mom's flashback. This was reiterated again recently with the sun shield from Dorian Bragi and Egghead Island. This has been talked about time and time and time again. All right, we are going to get Sun God Lord here. In fact, I think a lot of Sun God lore is probably coming up in Egghead Island as well, considering we've got, Vegapunk talking about how the world is going to sink. I'm assuming he's probably going to tell us something about the Void Century, something about the Sun God. But again, there will be even more Sun God related lore within Elbaf. And one of the big things that I think is going to be talked about in terms of Elbaf and the Sun God is what was up with the giant straw hat in Marijoa. We've got an arc entailing characters that are literally giants who worshipped a sun god. One would believe, and after what we've seen of Luffy so far, utilizing his Nika powers and becoming massive and grabbing Kizaru, I would not be surprised if Joy Boy in some way was a giant or seen as a giant by the giants of Elbaf, and that he wore the giant straw hat when he was around. That's now being held within Marijoa in the confines of that giant freezer room. I do think that is going to be talked about there. Now, the next thing, because I see people saying, Big Mom, question mark, Big Mom, what's going to be talked about in regards to Big Mom? Big Mom. Remember, during the Big Mom flashback, two of them actually, they mention Loki, the Prince of Elbaf, right? The Prince of the Kingdom who was going to get married off to Lola. That created a giant stir, and then Big Mom wasn't able to have the giants on her crew. We also saw this stuff in Big Mom's flashback where she was a little kid and she ended up killing the giants of Elbaf. There's going to be a lot of stuff fleshed out there in regards to not just Big Mom, but again, also what exactly is going on with Loki. Now, one thing that I'm going to speculate on a little bit later, and we're going to talk about a little bit more in depth, is sort of the theme of Elbaf, the general theme, I think, being around belief and religion, right? So much of what goes towards the end of One Piece, right? Thinking about like what the One Piece could be, the belief that Roger left his treasure there on Laugh Tale, all these legends, people believing in the sun god, believing in Nika. Again, I think belief and faith are all going to be really big themes when it comes to us eventually reaching the Elbaf Island arc. I do think they're going to be very important, and I actually think Loki is going to play a role in that. I don't know necessarily how that's going to play a role in it, but maybe Loki believes himself to be a god. Maybe he has some type of god complex. It could be that he worships a different god. If you'll remember, Jaguar de Sol actually talked about this in regards to the giants of Elbaf, that the giants don't necessarily believe the same things, right? That giants believe in different things. Some might worship the sun god. Some might worship somebody else. It could be that Loki worships somebody else, and that somebody else we're going to talk about a little bit later, because again, what is the opposite of the sun? The moon. There's a character on the moon right now that has a bit of a god complex, that has a lot of potential ties to Elbaf. We're going to talk about it in just a little bit. But again, Loki, guaranteed we're going to see stuff about Loki in Elbaf. Done deal. No doubt about it. Now, the reason I listed here, Usopp and Shanks's roles. The reason I did a question mark is because I think these are two characters that a lot of people are speculating we're going to get a lot of stuff for, but in actuality, I don't think are actually going to play that big of a role in the Elbaf story arc. I would not be surprised if by the time the Straw Hats get to Elbaf, Shanks has already left. That Shanks isn't there at all. He's already off to go find the One Piece. He's already off doing his own thing. And then even though we got that little tease with him and the Giants in Elbaf, and we saw the fight with Kid, I don't think we're really going to get a lot of Shanks here. I would love to see more of Shanks. I'm not saying that this can't happen. I'm just saying that I think it's a lot less likely than a lot of other people are speculating. Because again, Shanks is one of those mysteries that I think is going to be saved until just the right moment. And we will be talking a little bit about that during the next story arc that I'm going to talk about after Elbaf. But again, I think Shanks's role and the role of the red-haired pirates might be fleshed out a little bit in Elbaf. And we might get some information about their relationship with the Giants. But I do not think this is a huge Shanks arc. Again, as people are pointing out in the chat, we literally saw Shanks leaving, and yet people are still speculating that this is going to be a major Shanks arc. I really don't think that's going to be the case. Again, you do have connections with Shanks and the theming of his ship and the Viking stuff. I'm not saying there isn't stuff there, but again, I don't think he's going to be playing a massive role in the story at that point. Now, the other character, of course, is Usopp. Usopp has been hyping up Elbaf, talking about Elbaf ever since Little Garden, getting excited to be a great warrior and hanging out with the Giants and training with the Giants. But I think we're looking at a situation similar to Wano Country here, in which a lot of people speculated before Wano Country that, oh man, this is going to be Zoro's arc. We're going to get so much information, so much information. What ended up happening? We ended up getting the information about his family in an SBS. Wasn't even part of the main story arc. I think that's probably going to be the case with Usopp as well. I think Usopp will most definitely have a cool moment or two in Elbaf, but the idea that this is going to be Usopp's arc in the same way that like Whole Cake was Sanji's arc, that's just not going to be the case. There's too much other stuff going on in Elbaf. I really do think people should temper their expectations in terms of what exactly Usopp is going to do. Now, with that being said, I do have one very specific prediction for Usopp in the Elbaf arc. My specific prediction is one, I think we're going to see even more of his observation hockey, some type of advanced observation hockey, more of the future sight stuff, because that's setting up a potential fight that I think is going to happen towards the very, very end of the series that we'll talk about later on this stream. But I do think that one, there's going to be more of his heightened observation hockey. And then two, I actually think there's a very, very strong likelihood that we could get a moment of Usopp awakening within himself or unlocking within himself. I always hate using those words in regards to what I'm about to talk about because people will always go, oh, but it's something you're born with. Yeah, but you know what I mean when I say he's unlocking it. That's Conqueror's hockey, right? I think there is a high likelihood with all of Usopp's lies coming true and wanting to be this great warrior of the sea that he actually does have latent within him Conqueror's hockey, and we end up seeing that at some point during the Elbaf story arc. So that's what I think we're going to see for Usopp. Not necessarily big character development, but actual like power-ups for him, I think is probably the biggest thing that we're going to get. Of course, he's going to be involved in the story. He's one of the Straw Hats. He's going to be doing stuff, but I just don't necessarily think he's going to play as big of a role in the story as people are expecting, considering everything else we have coming up. Now, the other important things I want to talk about. Saul and the Books of Ohara, potentially tying to a Void Century reveal or the final road poneglyph location. Now, for a long time, I kind of speculated that the final road poneglyph would actually be on Elbaf. You can go back to some of my old live streams like 3-4 years ago, and I talked about how, Elbaf is obviously this ancient type of island with lots of history, lots of lore. It wouldn't be surprising to me that one of the road poneglyphs is actually there, but the more I thought about it, I actually think that we're going to get the location of the last road poneglyph within the books from Ohara that we're going to find out more information about whenever Saul reunites with Robin, or we get more information from him regarding the books that were saved that we saw during the flashback in Egghead Island that are now present in Elbaf. Now, again, This is prime opportunity for some Void Century reveals, again, dating back to something I said earlier during the stream with the Sun God lore. There's going to be lots of Sun God lore, again, with the themes of religion and faith and who the giants believe in and what it means to be a god and all this kind of stuff. I do think that is going to come into play at some point within Elbaf, and I do think that that is going to be tied with some type of Void Century reveal that's going to happen with the books from Ohara. So again, a lot of things could end up being revealed, but here's where we're going to slightly go off the deep end a little bit. I think everything that I said up to this point is relatively safe. I don't think I said anything that's really that shocking, but I think moving forward, here's where people are going to disagree. Also, I see people saying, literally forgot about the man marked by flames. He has the poneglyph. No, Onaj. If you've listened to some of my other live streams, you know I personally believe the man marked by flames is none other than Saul. I think it was an ice burn. Obviously, you can get ice burns. He was within. We also saw him with all the other bandages. We know Kid ended up there in a confrontation with Shanks, went to Elbaf directly. Kid, literally the last time we saw him, said they were going to be going after the dude with the flames. He ended up fighting Shanks. I actually think Saul and the man marked by flames are one and the same, and I actually do think that's all tied together. Again, remember, when we saw Saul recently, he was covered in bandages. So again, that's not leaving the man marked by flames thing out of here. To me, that the whole man marked by flames thing and people talking about it and theorizing on it feels a lot like the stuff that happened in the lead up to Emu and Rox D. Zebek, right? Where Oda said, we're going to get this lurking legend. And then 20 different people had ideas about lurking legends. And then to this day, people are still like, whatever happened with the lurking legend? I'm like, which one, right? Oda set stuff up on purpose and gave us just the right amount of content without spoiling us in terms of the names of those characters. So again, I really do think the man marked by flames is Saul or another character that we're going to talk about a little bit later. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself. The big thing, no pun intended, in regards to Elbaf, are the giant beasts of Elbaf. These were just recently mentioned again during the Egghead Island arc, in which Dory and Bragi were talking about the giant demon forms of the Gorosei, of the 5 Elder Stars, and then mentioning to them specifically, right, that they look like the giant beasts in Elbaf. They remind him of the giant beasts in Elbaf. Now, the idea of giant animals being on an island filled with giants honestly isn't that surprising, but I think what is potentially interesting and how this could potentially tie with Void Century lore is Zunisha, right? Zunisha is this giant elephant who apparently did something during the Void Century. The punishment was to walk the seas. I think some of that information could end up coming here, and that little teaser about the giant beasts of Elbaf might have actually been fleshing that out as well and giving us a little tease that we might find out more about these giant animals. The second thing is the Adam Tree. Again, for those of you who need a little bit of reminder of what the Adam Tree is, this is the tree in which, it developed the wood that then made the Thousand Sunny. Thousand Sunny is built from the wood from this tree. It's this legendary tree. Shipwrights all like using the wood of this tree to create their ships. There's a lot of lore behind the Adam trees and the Eve tree. And we saw in Big Mom's flashback during Whole Cake Island a massive tree on Elbaf that looks a lot like the Adam tree. If it's not the Adam tree, I don't know what that is. I have no idea. But I do think that tree is going to be important, especially considering, again, Norse mythology and the tree within Norse mythology and some of the other things that are tied to that we're going to talk about in a little bit later. Just keep all that stuff in mind. Here is where we're going to go off the deep end. Here's the thing I don't think a lot of people agree with me on. I've seen some people also talk about this online, and I completely agree with them. This is not an original thought. This is something that I know lots of other people have said. I'm just regurgitating, other things that I've thought about and then other things that other people have said. So I'm not trying to say this is just my theory. A lot of people believe this is going to end up being the case. I really do think this is the arc, no pun intended again, in which Eneru returns. Again, the themes of belief and faith and what does it mean to be a god. And you have Eneru, who's tied in the story previously as having a god complex, who's on the moon right now. The Moon Kingdom is titled Burka, which was the name of a very famous trading post during the times of the Vikings named Burka, which also happens to be the sky island in which the Birkins come from. And who is a Birkin? Uruj. And who has some type of relationship that has been teased and foreshadowed time and time again against Eneru? Uruj, Who is a character that has an electric attack named after the god of thunder in Norse mythology? Eneru. There's so much stuff here tying Eneru and Aruj and the people of the Sky Kingdom and their worship of the sun god and the giants' worship of the sun god all coming together within the Elbaf story arc. Again, this is something that people think I'm crazy whenever I bring this up, but I really do genuinely believe that Uruj and Eneru are going to be returning and showing up during the Elbaf arc. Again, think about the first island that we saw Aruj at right at the very beginning of the post-time skip. He arrived at the Thunder Island, right? We know that Eneru 8 years ago destroyed Burka. He wiped it out. And we know that Uruj is the fallen mad monk, right? Again, themes of religion, themes of faith. What does he believe in? Do the Birkins also believe in the sun god? Are they allied in some way? There's so much stuff that connects Eneru and Aruj with the giants of Elbaf. So just keep that in mind. And I have even more evidence for this as we move forward. But I do think this is one massive thing that people are overlooking when it comes to Elbaf that I really do think is going to be important. And that is the return of Uruj and the return of Eneru, and what that potentially means for the story. Again, Eneru, the people of the moon, the automatas, it being named Burka, him potentially coming down with the ark, potentially giving us information about Uranus. We still don't know exactly what is up with Uranus. It's the one big ancient weapon that's still kind of up in the air. Again, no pun intended, considering it's the ancient weapon of the sky. But think about that. The sky people, right? If you're going to have an ancient weapon from the sky, we're probably going to find out about it in some way, or the people that will have some type of knowledge of it would be the people from the sky, Eneru and Uruj, who again, maybe not necessarily Eneru, but a lot of people within Skypiea and potentially the Birkins as well worshipped the sun god, as was talked about in Skypiea. So I do think there's a lot of story connections that could tie to that, and the worship and the beliefs and the sun god ideas that are going to be proposed during the Elbaf arc. And last but not least, because we are going to get a lot more in depth on the Aruj and Eneru stuff. Last but not least, I want to say, I do believe that Elbaf will lead into Ragnarok, right? The idea of this massive war that will destroy the world. Think about that. Think about what's coming up in the story of One Piece that has been teased, might give you a pretty good idea of what I think the next arc after that is going to be. But I really do think Eneru coming down, Uruj coming down, this massive war with the giants could potentially lead, especially if we find out the location of the last row poneglyph in Elbaf, will potentially lead directly into final war. But again, before we get there, a couple other things regarding Elbaf that I want to talk about. First and foremost, boom, Uruj's potential role in Elbaf and evidence for why I believe he's going to show up here. First and foremost, as we've seen throughout the entirety of the post-time skip era, nearly every member of the Worst Generation has met Luffy or has been heavily involved in some type of story. We have Capone in Whole Cake Island. We had Apu and Hawkins and Drake and Kid and Killer, obviously, in all this stuff in Wano Country. Of course, Law being heavily involved with all the stuff leading to Wano Country, Dressrosa, Punk Hazard, all of that. Bonnie in Egghead Island, literally right now. All of these supernovas are having a role to play. All these Worst Gen members are having a role to play, except Uruj. He's the only one left. Why have we not seen him? Because, again, the religious ties, the idea of the Mad Monk, it's going to come up during Elbaf. 2, he's the only one of any of the supernovas whose devil fruit has yet to be named in the story. It hasn't been detailed. It hasn't been named. We've seen him get hit and then grow muscles, but we don't really know anything about that. Also, I see someone in the chat saying Uruj's wings being the Birkin type wings are also interesting. Exactly. That's what I'm saying, man. That's what I'm saying. Again, the Birkins. Anyway, we're getting there. We're getting there. Anyway, his devil fruit hasn't been named. But the thing that's interesting about his devil fruit is that his devil fruit is the perfect devil fruit for the Elbaf arc. If you're going to have a supernova fight along Luffy who can turn into a giant using his Gear 5 powers, you need somebody else who can stand toe-to-toe with the giants, right? Who else is better suited for this than Uruj, who literally grows in size and mass every time that he gets hit? If he gets bigger and bigger and bigger as he's tanking these attacks potentially from Eneru or some of these other characters, right? This is the perfect arc for him to stand toe-to-toe against the giants, for him to actually make sense in the story. Again, that ties with religion. There's too much there. He's been described as the Mad Monk. Again, as I mentioned early, it's going to be an arc heavy with religious theming. He's a Birkin. He has a grudge against Eneru, who destroyed the sky island of Birka 8 years ago. Birka's the name of the city on the moon. Birka's the name of the legendary Viking trading post in real life. Too many connections. But the big thing that I think is important, and the thing that we've seen time and time again from so many of these Worst Generation members, is we need to potentially find a way for Urouge to want to work with Luffy, right? In the same way, Capone worked with Luffy in Whole Cake Island, Bonnie worked with Luffy in Egghead Island. We need a reason for Urouge to want to work with Luffy, because otherwise, why would he just randomly show up here? However, if he hears news post-Egghead that the sun god has returned and his people potentially worship a sun god, and that sun god is an Elbaf and he's a religious man, you think he's going to pass up the opportunity to go see the sun god for himself? No. There's simply no way. He, if he does show up, will be a potential ally of the Straw Hats and probably the Giants if they worship the same god against Eneru and the Automata army and the coming of Ragnarok. Which again, going back to something I mentioned a couple slides ago in regards to Loki, if we're looking for an ally of Eneru, not just Eneru and the Automata, because obviously Luffy can wipe Eneru. Luffy wiped Eneru pre-time skip before Haki, right? Eneru is not a threat to Luffy. But Oda has said time and time again that he would be one of the deadliest Devil Fruit users. And if you don't have the right Devil Fruit to deal with his lightning, you're going to get washed. All right, Eneru wasn't using advanced observation Haki. He wasn't using Conqueror's Haki. He wasn't using armament Haki. I mean, he was not even close to like some of the vice admirals that we've seen right now in this story. Imagine when Eneru comes back, which he will come back. Imagine a stronger Eneru, an Eneru with an awakened Devil Fruit power, an Eneru who's potentially trained his mantra on the moon. We're looking at a major threat. And again, while Luffy could easily handle Eneru, there will probably be some type of story reason in which Luffy cannot go up against Eneru right away. We've seen this a lot recently. We saw this in Egghead. We saw this in Wano Country. There are always reasons as for why Luffy can't just immediately wash the person. Because again, we're reaching a point in the story now where Gear 5 is so strong that I honestly feel like Luffy can pretty much wipe out everybody in the story at this point. And Luffy is going to wipe out whoever Oda wants to wipe out. But I do think for the world at large, if Luffy is not focused on him, Eneru is still a massive threat. If you look at the buffs that Lucci got, if you look at the buffs that I believe Crocodile is going to have by the time we see him again in the story, no doubt about it, Eneru is going to have a buff. And I do think the idea of potentially having an ancient weapon from the moon, potentially being in control of Uranus or awakening Uranus, or Uranus being on Birka in the city on the moon, and the Automata army, and potentially having an ally in Loki, if Loki is the one that goes against the grain that doesn't believe in the same things the Giants believe in, and he's this lone prince of Elbaf. There's so many things that could tie all this stuff together. And I do think that Eneru could end up seeing an ally in Loki and maybe his division of the Giants as well. Because again, as Saul said time and time again, right? The Giants don't all believe in the same things. They don't. Some are seen as barbaric. Some believe in the sun god. Some have different traditions. Some they worship the elders that were in the village. There's all this other stuff going on. So again, faith, religion, belief will all be major themes in Elbaf, and this is where I think Eneru and Urouge come back. That pretty much wraps up most of my thoughts on what I think Oda can pack into the Elbaf arc. And again, that right there answers like a third of those questions that were on the earlier slide, a third of the loose ends. And we're still not even done yet, because if I move forward a couple more slides, if you look at this, right? Things ain't looking good for Eneru. Again, I'm not saying if Eneru comes down from the sky that he's suddenly not going to get washed, right? If Luffy ends up coming in contact with him, like, of course. But I do think, again, Eneru's defeat would be the perfect setup for the final war, especially if Eneru somehow, some way is currently in control of Uranus, and then now Uranus is left without an owner, and the world government finds out that Uranus is now in Elbaf during some type of civil war of the Giants with different beliefs with a moon god and a sun god. You know they're going to be on top of that. So again, if you look at Norse mythology, Thor's exploits, including his relentless slaughter of his foes and fierce battles with the monstrous serpent and their foretold mutual deaths during the events of Ragnarok, are recorded throughout sources for Norse mythology. Again, the death of Eneru could lead directly into final war, especially if Uranus is taken into consideration and the world government finds out about it. So keep all that in mind. Again, Eneru's death could potentially be a big thing that leads into final war in more ways than one. But again, I'm not Oda. I don't write the story. I'm just simply putting all the stuff together that he's given us context clues for in the story and all the little hints that he's laid out. Now, moving on, because now we're looking at the final saga. Halfway there. Egghead Island and Elbaf, right? What else is next? Again, I think there are two major story arcs left within the final saga after Egghead. One of them, I think, is pretty obvious. One of them is Final War, right? Again, Ragnarok, the war that could potentially end the world. This massive confrontation that has been hyped up by a number of different names. The Throne Wars, the Final Wars, the War for the... there's so many different names for what the final war within One Piece will be. And I used to believe that Final War was the last arc of One Piece. And I no longer believe that. We're going to get to this a little bit later during the presentation. But Oda specifically stated, right, that when we get to Laugh Tale, when we find out what the One Piece is, the series will end. He clarified that after Wano ended. Again, when we find the One Piece will end. That is not something that I think a lot of people really dove into. I think those of us who are content creators who theorized on where the story was going to end or how much exactly was left, probably always speculated that Final War would be where everything actually goes down. That we would get to Laugh Tale, potentially after Elbaf. We would find out some truth about the world with the One Piece reveal. And then that truth would lead to finally exposing the world government, taking down the Marines, taking down the world as we know it, all that stuff. Things have changed. Even if you take into consideration the stuff with, Vegapunk, what he mentioned in just the most recent couple chapters about the world sinking. A lot of stuff to consider when it comes to the Final War. So you can even see in here, there's a lot of stuff that I've put in this image of Final War. I put together the Royal Knights. I put Luffy. I put the other Straw Hats that take down the world government. The fire outside of Eni's lobby. Emu, Dragon, Sabo, Akainu, Vivi. Again, a lot of things coming together for this Final War story arc. But before we get there, it's time for another piece of trivia. Now, OG won the first one, but this next bit of trivia is going to be brought to you by none other than Rob. Take it away, Rob.
Yo, C2E2, what's the deal? It's Rob here from Shonen Showdown. Shout out to RogersBase for having me and all the lovely One Piece fans out there tonight. So I have a question for y'all. How many times did that sword painter Mihawk have to run away from my goat Shanks? All right, if you said 3, you're absolutely correct. He's always running from Shanks. Yo, bro, stop pushing agendas, man. Ask him a real question, bro. It is a real question, man. What? Come on, you know it's not the time for that. Come on. All right, fine. Hey, bro. Let's try this. What was the name of the weapon that Emu used to blow the Lucia Kingdom off the map?
This is such an easy one. If someone doesn't get this immediately, full name, there we go. Silver King, first one, came through immediately. Mother Flame, ding, 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 ding. Silver King, congratulations, you got it. I also think it was funny that Rob just took his time with this. Watch. He put a whole little break in there for people to answer as if people weren't gonna immediately get Mother Flame. But here we are. Okay, Rob.
If you answered Mother Flame, you're wrong. It's Mother Frame. Nah, let me stop. Listen, that's just a difference in translation. If you said Mother Flame or Mother Frame, you are correct. Congratulations. You know your One Piece. All right, not too bad.
Lovely. So shout out again to Silver King for answering it correctly. First one, Mother Flame. Just keep in mind, also, if one of my mods could go on there and click and mark down who actually won the trivia questions, then maybe send it to me on Discord afterwards, would be greatly appreciated so I don't have to go through the whole stream again. Thank you very much. But anyway, congratulations. Now, moving on. Let us continue. Bada bing, bada boom. Final War speculation. Things that I think are going to be happening during the Final War. First and foremost, this I think is the safest of safe predictions, right? The safest of the safe. Nefertari Lily and the Will of D explained, right? When we saw Cobra get killed by Imu and the Gorosei, and Sabo trying to save him, and all of them activating, what are the things that were talked about in that conversation? Lily, Vivi being the spitting image of Lily, Lily somehow, some way spreading the poneglyphs across the world, and the will of D. Now, something that came up actually since I presented this panel at C2E2 in the most recent chapter that we just talked about, right, was the idea of what the will of D could actually mean, what D could stand for. And one thing I never really took into consideration that was brought up in my chat that I was like, I love this. Because people talk about, you know, the will of dreamers, the will of dreams, the will of the devil potentially with devil fruits, the will of demon, the will of anything. The dawn, obviously. Dawn is the other big one, the will of the dawn. But the one that came up during that stream where I was like, oh my God, this is a really awesome idea, is potentially the will of D being the will of the drowned, the will of the people who sank to the bottom of the sea during the Void Century when Imu wiped off the ancient kingdom off the map. Like that idea, when that was brought up, I'm like, bro, the second I heard that, I'm like, that is such a cool idea. The will of the people who previously drowned being passed on to the people on the surface who have dreams that then create devil fruits that bring upon a new dawn. Bro, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. But again, I don't think we're going to get the full explanation for what exactly the will of D is or the massive Void Century flashback with Nefertari Lily or anything like that until we get to Final War. Now, I do think Final War is going to be very long. I think there's probably going to be chunks of Final War that are focused specifically on flashback, and then I think there's going to be giant chunks of Final War that are focused on the actual skirmishes themselves. But I think the one big skirmish, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, the one big thing I want to talk about in terms of the Final War and what it means to take down the world government that I think people are talking about it at least, but I think people don't necessarily think it's going to be as big of a portion of the Final War as I believe it's going to be. I think it's going to be the majority of the Final War is going to be this. I think it's the Revolutionary Army versus the world government. And that does not just mean Imu and the Gorosei. That means the Marines. That means the Royal Knights, the Celestial Dragons, all those people, the people on the side of the world government versus the Revolutionary Army and their allies, which will most likely be all the other kingdoms that are allied with Luffy, and then, of course, the Straw Hats themselves, and potentially some of the other Yonko, too, right? You know, there's some Yonko who might sit this one out. There's some who might want to enter into the chaos. We don't really know the full extent. This could go any number of ways, but I do actually think that the major portions of the story or the major fights against Blackbeard and against the Cross Guild are not happening during Final War. I actually truly believe that the fight against the Cross Guild and the big Zoro versus Mihawk fight and the big Luffy versus Blackbeard fight is going to happen after Final War. And we'll talk about that a little bit later and why I'm actually placing it there in the story and not during Final War. But I think there are actually, no pun intended, bigger fish to fry during the Final War with the takedown of the world government before getting to Laugh Tale. Now, another thing here, right? Full Void Century flashback. That ties in with the stuff with Lily. That ties in with the Ancient Kingdom. That ties in with the Will of D. I think whatever does not end up getting revealed during the remainder of Egghead and during Elbaf and finding out things from the Book of Ohara is going to be revealed during the flashback regarding Imu and the Gorosei and the development of the world government during the Final War. I think there's no way in which we get to the Laugh Tale arc and we don't already know the truth of the world. I think there are a couple other little things tied to the overall truth of the world, specifically tied to one character that I'm thinking of, that could potentially wait until Laugh Tale to be revealed. But I think the massive Void Century flashback is going to happen during the beginning of Final War in the lead up to the actual fight to then give the readers that motivation and that drive, and as if we ever even need it anymore, right? To really want to take down Imu and these other characters for all the awful things that they did leading up to the Void Century and all that stuff. So that's important. Now, another thing. Everyone is here. I'm titling this the Smash Brothers Ultimate of One Piece arcs. You know, Oda has mentioned time and time again that the war at the end of One Piece is going to make Marineford look like a joke, right? That Marineford, this massive fight with all these other major characters, Yonko, Marines, Admirals, all these characters are coming together during Marineford, and that is just a speck compared to what we're going to see during Final War. That says to me, everybody is showing up here. everybody that's going to show up that's not going to be at Laugh-Tale directly or actually racing to Laugh-Tale, they're showing up here. And when I say everyone, I really mean everyone. I think this is Oda's prime and last opportunity to bring back whoever else he wants to bring back. Again, we already talked about Eneru. I really think Eneru's fight will be resolved by the end of Elbaf, and his potential death lead to Final War in some way, as I talked about earlier, potentially tied to Uranus. But he could end up making it to Final War, right? There's no reason in which Elbaf couldn't just directly lead into Final War. There's no reason in which that confrontation I brought up with the Giants and Eneru and the People of the Moon and Uruj and Luffy isn't already technically seen as the start of the Final War saga, right? Elbaf could potentially end with some type of reveal from the books from Ohara, right? And then lead into Final War once Eneru descends. However they want to split the thing up, I do think, though, Eneru's arrival will usher in that we're now in the end game and we're in Final War. So that's that. So anyway, everyone is here, bringing this back. I think when I say everyone, I really do mean everyone. I think all the big cameo characters, all the characters that you guys want to see come back, all the characters that potentially, are canon but haven't been seen in the story up to this point. I'm talking Shiki, I'm talking Uta, right? I'm talking characters that we've seen one or two panels of that we know are canon to the story. Oda is going to use this opportunity to show them in the actual manga. There's no way that he doesn't. So that's what I'm saying here. Everyone is here. All the cameos are showing up. And I think what better way to have these cameos than to have another Impel Down breakout, right? You got to consider, okay, if all the Yonko are not directly involved with wanting to take down the world government, say, for example, the big two that I'm thinking of are Buggy and Blackbeard. What does Blackbeard want and what does Buggy want? Blackbeard wants to, well, first off, he wants power, right? But wants to be recognized by the world government, wants to full lead to be one of the kingdoms within the world government. In what world would Blackbeard be going against the world government? They're on the same side. They're evil, right? He's not going against Emu. Now, could he show up? Could the Blackbeard pirates show up and fight on the side of them for their own gains? Sure. Absolutely. And in fact, I do think that a lot of the Blackbeard pirate fights are actually going to happen during Final War. There's a couple that I think are going to be saved for Laugh-Tale specifically, some really major fights. But beyond the major ones, I think a lot of characters like Alvaro Pizarro, like San Juan Wolf, potentially even Katarina Devon. Though Katarina Devon, I think there's a likelihood that she could show up towards the end of the story because I have a specific idea for her final fight in mind. I think like some of the major Blackbeard commanders, including one big one, including Shiyu of the Rain, I think are going to be taken down during the Final War. So I do think there will be some remnant of the Blackbeard pirates involving themselves in the Final War, but I don't necessarily think that Blackbeard and the major fight against Blackbeard is going to be during Final War. I think that's going to be during Laugh-Tale, and we're going to flesh that out a little bit later. What I do think could potentially happen on the other side of things regarding another Yonko is Buggy, right? Buggy's going after the One Piece now. We know the Cross Guild is in power. The Cross Guild has bounties out against the Marines. They're obviously going to want to take this opportunity to strike against potentially the Admirals, potentially against some of the other Marine characters, right? This is their prime opportunity to do that. So I do think Cross Guild will be heavily involved in the Final War. However, right, think about who the Impel Down breakout, a lot of the Impel Down breakout ended up being pinned on. Buggy, right? Buggy has many members on his crew, so does Blackbeard to be fair, that hail from Impel Down. The people of Impel Down previously, right, worship Buggy. You've got people like Mr. 3 who are now on Buggy's side until the end of the story. Buggy and the Cross Guild and all the other former important enemies of the Straw Hats that we saw in the first half of the story, this is their opportunity to cause havoc. This is their opportunity to break down the walls of Impel Down permanently, to potentially recruit the likes of Doflamingo, of Weevil, of some of these other major characters that we know right now are in Impel Down, right? We know that they're there. We know they're being held, waiting for the opportunity for the Final War to get their grubby little hands and things. Again, I feel like Cross Guild, the relationship that Buggy had with the original Impel Down breakout, the Cross Guild already being made up of so many people that came from Impel Down, or people who were previously imprisoned in Impel Down, or people who were former antagonists against the Straw Hats. They line up too well, and I really do think like Impel Down 2.0, the breakout, potentially Buggy being in charge of it, the Cross Guild being in charge of it, and then wreaking havoc among the final war could realistically happen here. Yeah, so I do think this is something that could end up happening. And I actually do think, I want to bring up something that someone brought up in the chat that I'm like, dude, I could see this absolutely going in line with the idea of Buggy always failing up. What is something that has been hyped up in the story up to this point? The empty throne, right? That nobody sits on the empty throne. Nobody sits at the top of the world. I could already see the panel in my head of Buggy somehow, some way during this final war as he's scavenging around, potentially looking for poneglyphs or looking for treasure or trying to loot the palaces of Marijoa while all this stuff is going down, stumbling into the throne room and landing on the empty throne and getting that shot of Buggy as the leader of the world. And again, like adding to his myth, adding to all these ways that Buggy fails up within the story. Again, Buggy sitting on the empty throne, definitely something I think is going to happen. I'm glad it was brought up in the chat. Because again, imagine if a photo happens during that moment, like big news captures that moment. Like, bro, there's too many good moments in terms of comedy in which I think Buggy will be present. But again, I think that is going to be Buggy's role in Final War. I don't think Cross Guild is fighting the Straw Hats here. Again, I think the Straw Hats are going to be allied with the Revolutionaries, and they're going to be taking on world government members. I do not think this is their fight with the Cross Guild. And again, I don't think this is really their fight with Blackbeard as well. I think a lot of those major fights are being saved for Laugh Tale. However, there's one big Yonko that I haven't talked about yet, and this is going to upset some people. But the more I think about this and the more I theorize Final War, the more I'm like, I could really see this happening. And that's Shanks. Now, there's a number of different ways in which Oda can take Shanks, right? We saw that moment with Shanks. We have the memes of Shanks being a rat, right? Going to the Gorosei, talking about a certain pirate, all this other stuff. His father and the stuff with the Holy Knights and all that kind of stuff. Like, I think even the evil twin theory has been out there. Like, there's a lot of different things that tie Shanks to the story at the core of the Final War, which is the takedown of the world government, right? And the fight against them. And his father and Luffy's father and both of them being present, and what's that going to mean for the story? However, I do not believe in the Shanks is evil theory. I just don't. I never have, right? Shanks is this ideal for Luffy. He's his role model. He's the one that gave Luffy the straw hat. Luffy wants to give it back to Shanks. I think that Shanks is going to have a major sacrifice during the Final War. Specifically, I think Shanks and the red-haired pirates. You have to remember, Shanks had the opportunity to go to Laugh Tale, but hung back and took care of Buggy, right? Buggy and Shanks didn't actually get to Laugh Tale. So if Shanks actually allows Buggy and Luffy to go on and see what is actually waiting for them at the One Piece and go on and travel to Laugh Tale themselves, and he makes some major sacrifice at the end in which Luffy cannot give back the Straw Hat, and Buggy doesn't ever end up having that cathartic moment of reunion with him that they had when they bonded when they couldn't go to Laugh Tale as children. Bro, the signs are all there, and I see an opportunity in which Luffy at the end of Final War, right, like, there's an opportunity for them to escape. Laugh Tale's been revealed. We get the location of Laugh Tale. We find out. Oh, by the way, one other thing I want to mention real quick. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. One other thing I want to bring up, right? Remember how I mentioned that back in the Elbaf arc, I thought we were going to get the location of the Final Road Poneglyph? I do think that's going to be the case. I think the thing we're going to find out is that the Final Road Poneglyph is actually in the hands of the world government. And that's why for so many years, nobody's seen it. Right? Because it's been kept under lock and key, has been a major secret, the same way the Empty Throne has been a major secret, the same way Emu is a major secret, the same way the Giant Straw Hat's a giant secret. Like, I do think the Final Road Poneglyph being in Final War makes a lot of sense, specifically being in Marijoa, because that then gives the characters that are present in Final War, the Yonko who would be going after the One Piece, the opportunity to then find out the location of Laugh Tale. They're all racing for that Final Road Poneglyph. They find it, They're copying each other's homework, and they all go off to Laugh Tale together to eventually find what the One Piece is. But of course, only one person can be the Pirate King. There's only one victor at the end of the day. But I do think that is going to be the last big conflict of Final War, is I think going to be the fight for that last road poneglyph, and that will directly lead into the confrontations with Blackbeard and Buggy and Luffy and all of their crews once we get to Laugh Tale. But again, let's go back to this big Shanks sacrifice moment, right? Imagine, again, if Uranus or the fight on Elbaf leads into Final War, imagine if the ancient weapons, which most likely they will be used here, are used during the Final War. I even wrote this here. The ancient weapons will be used during Final War, right? We're going to see Shirahoshi. She's going to show up. That's going to be a major cameo. Pluton, right now, in Old Wano, which we now know probably sunk because the world is going to sink if the truth about the world is revealed. Like, now we know that from Vegapunk after Egghead Island. That's probably going to show up. Right now, we are in the middle of a cover story with Yamato and with Momonosuke exploring Wano country, potentially maybe even like lining that up with the activation of Pluton, potentially a ship with the samurai going to the Final War, and that happening concurrently with Elbaf. Like, there's a lot of different ways the story could go, but Pluton's going to be on the way, right? I'm sure Crocodile's going to want to know about it as well. You've got the stuff with Shirahoshi and Poseidon, and then again, Uranus, which we'll probably end up seeing during Elbaf, which in some way will be connected to Aruj and Eneru and the sky in general. So keep all that in mind, right? Keep all that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is this, right? The final fight, go back. The final fight against Imu, the Gorosei, and the Holy Knights, and the final fights against the Marines and Admirals, right? I truly believe all of these things are going to happen during Final War. I really think by the end of Final War, we won't have very many Marines left. I think by the time we get to Laugh Tale, the Marine threat is done. And the good Marines that are left over are going to be picking up the pieces while the Yonko struggle to go find the One Piece, right? I'm talking like Kobe at the end of all this, Smoker, maybe Fujitora, right? Because we've seen Fujitora has, you know, a good side to him. But I think, honestly, Akainu, I think Green Bull, I think Kizaru, I think Kong, even though we haven't seen anything about him, Kong, the other major Marines, if Garp actually isn't dead, probably shows up here. Kuzan, like there's a lot of other major characters that I could see going down during this Final War concurrently with the fights against the Royal Knights. Because one other big fight that I keep thinking about that I would love to end up seeing is a fight between Shanks' father and Luffy's father, right? The main character of the story and his role model and the ideals of their parents clashing and coming to a head during this Final War, with Dragon obviously being the epitome of revolution, the one wanting to take down the world government, and Garling being the one who stands at the top of all these royal knights who are holding down the old order and who want to stand by the world government. Again, so many things parallel those fights, but I don't think that's going to be Dragon's only fight during Final War. I don't even necessarily think that's going to be Garling's only fight in Final War. I think we could end up seeing Shanks go against Garling at some point. There's any number of fights that could happen during Final War because so many characters are going to be involved here. Vice Admiral fights, everything. But there's a couple that I want to focus on beyond just Dragon versus Garling and the Royal Knights. One big one that I truly believe is going to happen is the fight against Akainu being left to Sabo. And let me explain why, okay? Again, leading into Final War, Imu and the Gorosei and the head of the world government are bigger fish to fry than Akainu. All right, the Straw Hats, the other characters within the story, they've already been dealing with Akainu time and time again. Is he a stopgap? Absolutely. But they don't necessarily need to beat Akainu in order to get to Final War. Now, does that mean I think there's going to be no clash between like Luffy and Akainu whatsoever? Absolutely not. Of course, Luffy's going to have a fight with Akainu. But I definitely see a situation in which something more important and something higher priority than Akainu ends up going down, and Luffy's got to go deal with Imu. And that initially he has his class with Akainu, but he's like, look, this is too much for me to handle. I got to go take this guy down. My friends are in danger. Sabo, Can you handle this? And there being that great moment of Luffy thinking back to Marineford, thinking back to Ace, the previous owner of the Marimara no Mi, dying at the hands of Akainu. But Luffy, having grown as a person and knowing what he knows now, having faith in Sabo and saying, look, I'm leaving this up to you. I believe in you. I have faith that you're carrying on the will of Ace. I'm leaving Akainu to you. And then that gives us the perfect opportunity for Ace to have a rematch against Akainu, right? An actual real fight where Akainu isn't just taunting him and saying your devil fruit is never going to be as powerful as my devil fruit, right? Akainu, he brought that up in the story directly, that your fruit will never be able to overpower my fruit. And yet, I think if anyone is going to be able to do it, it's going to be Sabo. Either using blue fire or some type of new technique or his hockey or whatever. But Sabo carrying on the will of Ace. And one final clash against Akainu ending with a fire fist attack and potentially seeing like some type of mirrored panel where you see Ace doing one in the past paired with Sabo doing one in the present against Akainu and like actually taking down Akainu for his long lost brother and fulfilling the story that Sabo, kept going back to during the stuff in Dressrosa. We're in Dressrosa. What was Sabo's biggest regret? That he couldn't be there for Ace, right? That he had amnesia, that he wasn't there for Ace when Ace died. This is his opportunity. Luffy was there when Ace died. But Luffy's got bigger fish to fry. Luffy's got to fight Emu. He's got to go against the head of the world government. Emu is the biggest villain in the series at this point. It's Emu. He's the one at the head of everything. That's going to be Luffy's opponent. So again, Luffy will clash with Akainu. I have no doubt. But the story ties are far too strong with the stuff regarding devil fruits and Ace's fruit never being stronger than Akainu's, and Sabo having the will of Ace, and Sabo not being able to be there during Marineford. I really do think Sabo will be the one to put down Akainu once and for all, which would then lead, if the Garling fight, Dragon fight, or whatever is already resolved by this point, to a potential awesome tag team with Dragon and Luffy, the head of the revolution, right? And the sun god himself fighting the actual literal head of the world government. Potentially Emu and all the Gorosei at once. Now, obviously, we're having Gorosei fights right now in Egghead Island. There's important stuff going down here. You're seeing Sanji kicking people in the face with like Venus Churro. You've got these other characters that could potentially, by this point, once they find out the weakness of the Gorosei, take on the Gorosei, right? But I really do think there's something symbolic about the revolutionaries and Luffy being the one to do it. And I really do think the Straw Hats are going to be busy with other characters. Again, those breakout characters from Impel Down. But one other really big thing I want to mention in regards to the takedown of the world government and the stuff going down at Final War. And again, a lot of this probably going to be happening at Marijoa. What is directly under Marijoa? Fishman Island. What has been prophesized? That a man in a straw hat will destroy Fishman Island, right? That's been prophesized. It's going to happen. But what could that actually mean, right? On one hand, if Luffy destroys Fishman Island, accidentally, right? If something happens during the fight against Emu in which he like breaks the red line and the rubble of the red line falls down into the sea and is going to crush Fishman Island, technically that means the prophecy could come true. However, we are specifically waiting for one moment that's going to change history, that's been hyped up time and time again since these characters' introductions. And that is the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, right? If you've got characters allied with Luffy who call themselves Straw Hats, I think there's actually a possibility for the ones who destroy Fishman Island or help to destroy the Red Line or take command of one of the ancient weapons or in some way play a major role in the final war while allied with Luffy, it's probably going to be the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. And that also leaves the perfect opportunity for the Straw Hats and their allies to continue fighting the final war while Luffy and Buggy and Blackbeard go off to Laugh Tale to discover what the One Piece actually is, right? because that allows ships that are allied with the Straw Hats to continue fighting. That allows the war to continue on even after you've beaten Emu, after even you've taken down the Gorosei, or potentially even other remnants of the world government that are still there. People who are staunchly defenders of the world government, celestial dragons who don't want to use their power. This is their opportunity. They could make a grand stand during the final war, and I think that's like a done deal, right? I think there's like, regardless of what they're going to end up doing, Straw Hat Grand Fleet is showing up in Final War. They're going to be present during it. They're going to do something major that's going to affect the story in some way. It's going to happen. Now, the last thing, because I went through all this stuff and I could just sit and talk about Marine fights and Admiral fights for ages on end and pair up different fights. I already talked a little bit about how I think Zoro's fight during Final War is going to be Shiyu, because obviously he can't fight Mihawk during Final War, because if he becomes the world's greatest swordsman prior to Luffy becoming the Pirate King, like you can't do that. The dreams have to happen at the same time, right? So I really don't think Zoro Mihawk, outside of maybe like a small clash, I don't think that's happening at Final War. I think that's happening at Laugh Tale. Keep that in mind. But the other big thing I want you to take into consideration, because I mentioned the stopgap thing with Shanks earlier, and the idea that Shanks and the red-haired pirates and potentially the Straw Hat Grand Fleet and the other allies of Luffy are the ones that hold back the remnants of the world governments and the Marines as Luffy goes off to go to Laugh Tale, right? I could see Shanks making some major sacrifice and the red-haired pirates making a major sacrifice. Or even imagine if, because now we're in Final War, people are going to be dying left and right. Imagine, for a moment, if you will, the red-haired pirates fighting with the Blackbeard pirates at some point during Final War and having a fight, a sniper battle between Van Augur and Yasopp. And Van Augur killing Yasopp, or Yasopp jumping in the way of a bullet for his son that was aimed at his son, while his son, as we talked about during the Elbaf portion, has been training his observation hockey, right? Future sight, predicting where people are going to show up, predicting where bullets are going to come from. Important to keep that in mind in regards to the theming of the Blackbeard pirates and the Shanks pirates. The Shanks pirates don't use devil fruits. The Blackbeard pirates are too heavily reliant on devil fruits. Yasopp going in the way of his son, allowing him to train just a little bit longer so that he could eventually be the one to take down Van Augur. There's too many good things lining up potential fights between them. And I really do think like Yasopp standing in the way of a bullet for Usopp during the Final War, or Shanks, again, holding off one last massive counterattack from Emu and the Gorosei or whatever and sacrificing himself so the others could go on, is something we're probably going to end up seeing during Final War. And I really don't think Luffy's ever going to give the Straw Hat back to Shanks. And I really don't think Shanks is going to Laugh Tale. I really think it's going to be a three-way race with Buggy and Blackbeard and Luffy. All right, now, one last thing, because I know there's a lot of stuff I'm throwing at you. One last thing I want to bring up here. Immortality surgery, right? We know the Gorosei have been alive for a long time. We know Emu's been alive for a long time. We don't know really what happened with them. We don't know if Emu was granted the immortality surgery, or there's something else going on there, or the Gorosei, or like what exactly is happening with the immortality surgery. Now, a lot of people speculate that, well, of course, at some point, Law is going to use the immortality surgery on somebody. Maybe that's going to be Law's sacrifice, right? That maybe during this final war, as an ally of the Straw Hats and somebody who's been with them since Punk Hazard, that he will potentially grant the immortality surgery to Luffy, so then Luffy can actually beat Emu and go on to Laugh Tale. Now, that's one big thing that I could see happening. However, the thing that I don't really see people talking about that I think is really important is if you are able to grant immortality surgery to somebody, could you also take that immortality surgery away? Because that could end up being Law's role within the story of the Final War. If he somehow is able to negate or take away the immortality surgery and the life of Emu and the Gorosei, that would be a substantial nerf in which the other Straw Hats, the other allies of the Straw Hats, could actually take them down. They've got this ridiculous regeneration. They're able to heal from all these attacks. But if that came from the immortality surgery initially, and Law discovers that it was used during some type of Void Century flashback or lore that we find out during Elbaf or whatever, this is his opportunity to slurp that stuff away like a milkshake, right? I do think that could be the role in which we see the immortality surgery in the story, and that it's not that Law grants it to somebody. Now, is that copium talking? Is that me simply saying, look, Law is my favorite character in the story. I don't want Law to die? Of course. Because you know that if you use the immortality surgery, you die. Of course I don't want Law to die. Of course. But I think there are other opportunities in the story for the immortality surgery to come up and be used, but just not granted to somebody. Again, to be taken away. And I think if anyone's going to do it, any previous owner of the Op fruit, it's probably going to be the guy who's like a secondary protagonist for the story that everybody loves and is a fan favorite. So that's what I'm going to say. That's what I think is Law. Anyway. Ancient weapons used, Grand Fleet's big moment, the fights against Emu, the Gorosei, the Holy Knights, the Admirals, the Marines, all this stuff. We've talked about all of this. Let's get into the last major fight. Let's get into the last major arc. Let's talk about Laugh-Tale. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I do think the Final Road Poneglyph is currently in the possession of the world government, and I do think at some point we are going to see Blackbeard, Buggy, and Luffy, who of course will all be present in Final War, but probably doing their own thing. As I mentioned, Blackbeard potentially allying with the world government. Stuff with Kuzan potentially being resolved here as well. Buggy being in charge of an Impel Down breakout, bringing out more of those cameos and bringing out more of those threats that are going to be added to Final War that are also going to be potentially wild cards. We don't know who they're going to take down. And then Luffy, of course, is our main protagonist, being the one to take down Emu and all that kind of stuff. So, the race for Laugh-Tale. That's the last thing I really want to talk about, and the last story saga. Because again, this pretty much encapsulates everything. And I'm not going to like dive too deep into other potential matchups here, because I could just, again, I could talk about this all day long in terms of like who I think is going to fight who. I think the really obvious ones, and the ones I brought up again, and I'll reiterate again, I think Yasopp versus Van Augur is going to happen here. I think we're going to get Dragon and Garling at some point. I think we're going to get Dragon and Emu at some point. I think Luffy and Akainu at some point. Luffy and Emu at some point. Potentially Luffy and Dragon together against somebody. Sabo versus Akainu I think is going to happen at some point. I actually think we can end up seeing Kizaru and Sanji, but that's like a whole nother discussion. But I really do think that Kizaru and Sanji would be an interesting matchup here as well. I could see that happening during this. I think Green Bull is going to be another major fight that's going to come up. I would love to see potentially Momonosuke and Yamato showing up with Pluton taking down Green Bull. That'd be a cool way to wrap up their story, but I do think there's going to be a Green Bull confrontation. And again, there's going to be a lot of different fights, but we'll speculate more on that a little bit later, because that would take up the entirety of the stream. There's going to be lots of encounters, lots of cameos, lots of fights. But at the end of the day, the big important ones, Luffy versus Emu, Sabo versus Akainu, Dragon potentially versus Emu, potentially against Garling, and Shanks having a major sacrifice, and a Yasopp Van Augur fight. I think that's all going to go down. Maybe even Shanks against Blackbeard I could see happening here too. I didn't even touch on that here. But really, I could see Shanks holding off Blackbeard, allowing Buggy and Luffy to make their way to Laugh-Tale, Blackbeard overtaking Shanks, being the last remnant, you know, trying to clean up everything after the Final War, being that scavenger, picking up devil fruits left and right, feeding them to his crew members and feeding them to random people, right? Picking up what's left, the scraps of the Final War, becoming too powerful, having too many devil fruits to overcome. Shanks trying to hold him off, holding him off for a little bit, but then Blackbeard overtaking him and chasing after Buggy and Luffy. I could see that happening too. So anyway, I've talked about enough. Let's move on to the final arc of the series, what I believe to be the final arc of the final saga, and that is none other than Laugh-Tale. Again, this came directly from Oda, right when he made those comments in 2022 about how he estimated 5 more years were left and all this other stuff. He specifically confirmed, when the One Piece is found, the series will be over. So again, there's only one way that this story ends. Now, I want to show a brief little preview of something. I managed to sneak into Oda's office, and I actually managed to get a sneak peek of Laugh-Tale. It's actually been animated already. He actually already animated this in case he wasn't actually going to be able to finish the series. He finished the story. So I'm going to show you guys how the series is going to end right now. So if you don't want to be spoiled on the end of One Piece, turn away. This is it. This is literally going to be the end of One Piece. Okay? I snuck into his office. I stole this off Oda's desk. This is the end. Okay? So this is your one and only warning. Here we go.
information. My treasure map's gone. Come down here and fight like a man.
Okay, Shorty, catch me. I'm gonna jump. Here I come!
So there you have it. That's the end of One Piece. That's the Laugh Tale arc. That's it. It's done. You saw the end of the series right there. It's done. Okay? Luffy fights Buggy. They race for the One Piece. He sinks them. It's over. That's the end of the series right there. Okay. Now, if you were stupid enough to believe I actually snuck into Oda's office, and you believed that for 1 second, seek help. Okay? But here's where we're actually going to go with this. Let us continue this chart and let's go to the next slideshow. All right, let's talk about the final actual arc of One Piece. Let's talk about Laugh Tale. Now, again, I have Shanks in this image just because obviously James made this image. I thought it matched up really nicely with the final image of the arc. You could see a couple things hidden in here that we'll talk about a little bit later in terms of reveals and all that good stuff. But again, I think the Laugh Tale arc is going to be a three-way race between Buggy, Blackbeard, and Luffy. I think it's highly important that all three of these characters are present at Laugh Tale physically upon finding the last robe poneglyph, putting everything together, and bringing the remnants of their crew post-Final War here. It's very important for a number of reasons we're going to get into. Now, first and foremost, the final race for the One Piece. I've talked about this a lot during the story arc. No brainer. I think the race to the One Piece, the hype, the culmination of the series being when they discover One Piece, you're going to have confrontations here. This is when I think we're going to get the full reveal of Luffy and Roger's dreams. You know, this has been teased multiple times in the story that Luffy and Roger had the same dream. I think this right here, the beginning potentially of the Laugh Tale arc, is when we're going to hear the reveal of their actual dreams, which could be any number of things, right? People speculate that they want a world where everybody's a pirate and then everyone's free. They want to be able to sail the seas. I do think it's interesting, right, that now we know that, like, when you find out the truth about the Void Century, that the world sinks. I do think it's interesting that they want everybody to go out to sea, potentially, because then they'd be able to live their lives freely without the control of the world government. There's a number of different ways you could take that. But obviously, the Straw Hats know Luffy's dream. You know, Whitebeard and Odin knew Roger's dream. But I think us as the reader, I almost said as the Weeda, but as the reader, us as the reader, I think we're going to discover the dream for ourselves during the Laugh Tale arc. This is where I think all the remaining lore is revealed. And notice, I didn't talk at all about Zebek and God Valley and Blackbeard really during my stuff with the Final War. That is because I theorize that the stuff that we did not see in God Valley that has something in relation to Zebek has something to do with Blackbeard's final power-up, or who Blackbeard really is, or Blackbeard's ultimate goal. I think a lot of that is tied to Blackbeard. I think Zebek and Blackbeard have a very, very, very strong connection, and I think really Zebek and Blackbeard have the opportunity to be potentially final antagonist of the series, right? When it took all of those people coming together to take down Zebek back in the day, it's going to be everyone coming together to take down Blackbeard. Same type of thing. But I really actually think Zebek stuff is not going to be fully revealed until after Final War is over. I do think there could still be, like me saying God Valley, Zebek, and Void Century and Blackbeard stuff is revealed here. I don't think it's all of the reveals, but I do think that everything that is not shown in Final War, which is probably going to be more than a lot of people expect, will be saved for this moment during Laugh Tale. So I wanted to bring that up. Now, here we go. Straw Hats versus Blackbeard Pirates versus Cross Guild. That, I think, is supremely important. Okay, because again, when we're looking at final fights within the series, there are two really important ones that come to mind that probably have to happen at the same time. Luffy versus Blackbeard and Zoro versus Mihawk, right? Those have to happen around the same time because you cannot have a giant chunk of the story in which Zoro is already the world's greatest swordsman before Luffy is the Pirate King. Can't happen, right? Those dreams have to happen around the same time. And Mihawk and his final fight against Zoro, I really do think is going to be taken all the way to Laugh Tale. And I actually have a very specific prediction about how the Cross Guild is going to fight with the Straw Hats leading into the race for the One Piece at Laugh Tale. But that's going to spoil something that I'm going to bring up a little bit later that I don't want to fully talk about yet. I just want to throw something out there for you guys. I want to throw this out there and you guys can speculate about it, okay? Real quick, here's what I'm going to throw out here. The phrase, wings of the Pirate King, okay? One of the wings is Zoro. Pirate King, wings of the Pirate King. Luffy wants to be the Pirate King. Who is Mihawk with right now? Who is he a wing of? Buggy. Who is the other wing of Buggy? Who's the other wing of the Cross Guild? Crocodile. Who's the other wing of the Pirate King? Sanji. Okay? Think about that for a bit. And right now, if you're like, Sanji and Crocodile for the final fight for Sanji, just you wait. Because by the time I'm done with you talking about this Laugh Tale arc, you're going to be convinced that Crocodile and Sanji is the end-all be-all for the two of them. That Sanji and Crocodile is going to be the fight that's happening at the same time as Zoro versus Mihawk and happening at the same time as Luffy versus Blackbeard. I'm telling you, and here's the other important thing about that, right? Because Luffy versus Blackbeard, that is the ultimate fight. But realistically, Luffy is going to wash Buggy, right? If Luffy and Buggy, as you saw in that little preview that I showed earlier, the Looney Tunes, if Luffy and Buggy actually fought, it'd be over instantly, right? It'd be a joke. It'd be a joke of a fight. There's not even there's no possibility in which Buggy, even if he awakens, could realistically be a final fight for Luffy. However, there is no way, underline, no way Oda passes up the opportunity for one final, really goofy, really Looney Tunes-esque, really gag-filled fight against Buggy with Luffy. Luffy literally has Looney Tunes powers right now, and you've got a character that could split up his body a number of different ways, that can be stretched out in different ways, dragged onto the ground, turned into cannonballs, thrown across the sea. Like any number of things could happen. We are absolutely going to get a Luffy versus Buggy fight. But realistically, he's going to put down Buggy very quickly. I just think it's going to be a great opportunity for like a gag fight. It's going to be awesome. We're all going to love it. We're going to be laughing our butts off. I'm sure Oda's going to do something great. But that allows Buggy to be taken out and thrown to the sidelines to do his own thing while Luffy is fighting Blackbeard. So we get the culmination of everything with Buggy failing up so that Buggy, while Luffy's fighting Blackbeard and Zoro's fighting Mihawk and Sanji's fighting Crocodile and some of the other fights are happening that I'll detail a little bit later. So Buggy can actually find the One Piece first. But that Buggy is not going to know what to do with it. And it's going to be like, what the hell is this? This isn't what I wanted. What is this? And then maybe I don't even think he'll laugh about it. He'll probably just be like, what is this thing? But I could absolutely see a world in which Buggy becomes Pirate King first, right? And that because he's taken out of the way early by Luffy with a goofy Looney Tunes fight, that allows him to go off and do his own thing for the majority of the rest of Laugh Tale, while the serious Cross Guild fights like Mihawk and Crocodile can happen concurrently with Luffy fighting the real threat, which is Blackbeard. And that also opens up the door for the other major Straw Hat fights that will probably happen during Laugh Tale. Because again, think back to when we first met Blackbeard and think back to the characters that we've already seen being scrubs or being taken out. There are 3 characters in particular on Blackbeard's crew that I fully believe will be taken out during Laugh Tale and not during Final War, that I think are going to travel with Blackbeard to the end. They will be with him till the end. And that is the Ride or Die crew from Jaya. I'm talking about Doc Q. I'm talking about Van Augur. I'm talking about Gigis Burgess. I'm talking about the 3 of them. Because if you take into consideration that Zoro is going to maybe take out Shiyu during Final War and fight with Mihawk and Laugh-Tale, and that maybe Sanji takes out Lafitte or something during Final War, and that's where that fight happens, and he's off fighting Crocodile, that leaves the OG3, the day ones from Jaya. And they also happen to be the 3 perfect ones that pair with the characters that are not Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji. Doc Q, Chopper, Chopper's dream to cure any illness. Doc Q, literally with an illness fruit. The 2 doctors of the cruise. Van Augur, potentially, well, first off, not even potentially, being the sniper of the Blackbeard pirates. Potentially taking out Usopp's father, Yasopp, during the Final War. Yasopp having that moment of sacrifice for his son that he always wanted to give to him. Usopp having that moment to actually avenge his father, to utilize advanced observation haki to predict where Van Augur, who right now is too reliant on his devil fruit, can warp so that he can pinpoint where Van Augur lands and predict using future sight and take him out. Boom, there's Usopp's fight in Laugh-Tale right there, Van Augur. And then last but not least, Mr. Weesaucenaw, Mr. Burgess, grappler, wrestler, manly type character. Who's the dude that's always grappling and wrestling with the manly type characters? The one, the only, Super Frankie. Bro, of course, bro. Of course. And then that leaves one more other major character that I'm thinking of at least, who I think needs to have some type of final confrontation or final fight during Laugh-Tale, and that's Nami. Now, of the characters on Blackbeard's crew, the one that I think would be most suited for a fight against Nami would be none other than Katarina Devon, right? Katarina Devon has the devil fruit power to turn into other people, right? Literally has that devil fruit power to transform into other people. And Nami, who we haven't really seen have like a full one-on-one fight in a very long time. She's had little bits here and there in Wano Country. She fought with Ulti and stuff, but like it wasn't full 1v1 fights. Nami hasn't been able to really show what she can do nowadays. Nami's whole thing was mirages. Like bro, the idea of a mirage fight with a character whose whole conceit is being a mirage of somebody else's self and transforming into somebody else, bro, it's too good. It's too good to pass up. We gotta have that moment. I would love to see Devon versus Nami. The mirage versus the the imposter, I think would be really, really sick. I love that. I would love that. And for Nami to use her smarts to actually take down Devon and see through all her tricks, I think would be glorious. So I would love to see that moment. But, if what I said earlier about Sanji and Lafitte happening during Final War doesn't happen, I could then see a situation in which Lafitte is actually the fight for Nami and that Devon is the fight for Robin. I could see that happening as well. And then, for everyone else who's left over, characters like Brook, characters like Jinbei, well, guess what? You've still got all the Cross Guild. Because if we're assuming that the Cross Guild does Impel Down 2.0 and breaks out all these people from Impel Down during the Final War, and all of the other past characters come back as part of Cross Guild potentially, some of those remnants, some of those characters will probably be on the ship with Buggy and with Crocodile and with Mihawk leading into the fight with Laugh-Tale. That gives us plenty of opportunities for lots of awesome fights. We could potentially see Weevil. We could potentially see Doflamingo. There's any number of things that could happen. So we could speculate further. I'm not going to dive into it right now. The important ones, Luffy versus Blackbeard, Zoro versus Mihawk, Sanji versus Crocodile, Usopp versus Van Augur, Frankie versus Burgess, Doc Q versus Chopper. Those are locks to me. I cannot be convinced otherwise. And then, of course, the Looney Tunes fight between Buggy and Luffy that I think is going to happen at the very beginning of Laugh-Tale that will then allow Buggy to do his own thing during the arc, to slink off and find the One Piece first and become the Pirate King. Okay, so there you go. Now, last but not least, the final thing, Laugh-Tale. Of course, the series ends when we find the One Piece. When we find the One Piece, not when Buggy finds it, when Luffy and the crew find the One Piece. When they find the One Piece, the series ends. After the fight with Blackbeard, after the fight with the Cross Guild, after everything, they finally get to the One Piece and we get the major reveal. And that right there is the end of the story. That's it. Maybe. We're going to keep going a little bit later. But before we keep going, quick thing I want to do. Another bit of trivia. Okay, another bit of trivia. Let's throw this trivia in here, okay? Here's what we're going to do. This is the last bit of trivia from none other than my good buddy, the one, the only, Mr. Randy Troy. The first person to get this correctly, again, ends up getting a special prize that I'm going to decide after the stream is over. So check this out. Here we go. Let's go. Boom. Bada bing. Randy, I'm going to have you take it away. All right.
What's up, C2E2? Randy Troy here. Hope everybody's enjoying Chi-Town. Roger asked me to give you guys a good one. So the question is, what is the name of the book that Nami is searching for at the beginning of Little Garden? Bonus points if you can name the author as well, but maybe not real bonus points because I don't know if I actually have the power to dish out bonus points in this game, but intrinsically, here and among your peers, you'll have a bonus point. Savage. Anyway, thanks for having me, and enjoy the rest of the convention, everybody. Later.
Now, I saw somebody already get it. I saw somebody get the name of the book, but I'm going to do two. Because if somebody gets the name of the author, I will also give you a gift. But the first person who got it right away was Kebab316. The answer is indeed Bragman, which also happens to be the name of the gym, the One Piece gym that's in Tokyo that I went to last year. That's awesome, where everything's themed One Piece. Very cool. Elves got the name of the author, Louise Arnaz. You got it correct, Elves. Congratulations. Elves, you got it. Raf's Revenge, you got it. And Kebab, you got it. Moderators, make note of that. Mark them down. They're going to be getting a gift after all this is said and done. Congratulations, everybody. All the trivia winners, you guys are great. All right, here we go. Whoop, sorry, Randy. Let's go to the next slide.
What's
now,
up, C2E2? Randy.
Hold on. Let's keep going. Now, this is where my agenda's coming in. This is where I'm not just speculating on things that Otis told us. I am going in hard on a theory. I already said I truly believe Sabo is going to be the one to take down Akainu. That's one of my big theories going into the story. This is my other big one right here. That the final fight for Sanji is going to be none other than Crocodile. And it's going to happen during Laugh Tale. And it's going to be the fight of the wings of the Pirate King versus the other wings of the Pirate King. Sanji versus Crocodile, Zoro versus Mihawk. Now, first and foremost, there's a lot of stuff that ties Crocodile and Sanji together. A lot of stuff. More stuff than I think people realize. But right, the Glass Crocodile agenda. My man Randy in the chat already knows. Exactly. All right. First and foremost, just based on appearances, we got the two chain smokers, right? You've got Sanji always smoking, Crocodile always smoking, Crocodile with the cigars, Sanji with the cigarettes. All right, stylistically, there's so many cool panels Oda could do with smoke rings and Crocodile and Sanji fighting. It would just look incredible. I would love to see this. Two, the thing I already brought up earlier, the wings of the Pirate King idea, right? That if Zoro is fighting Mihawk, who's one of the wings of Buggy right now, the other wing of Buggy, Crocodile, would be none other, and that would be how they fight. Two, I know there's a lot of people who are like, but Crocodile, really, that's going to be the final fight for Sanji? Like, Crocodile, who got beaten pre-time skip by Luffy, like, you really think that's going to be a hype final fight for Sanji? Absolutely, because as we've seen time and time again, all right, Crocodile has not been just resting on his laurels during the time skip. Crocodile's got like well over $1 billion berry bounty, right? Is one of the leaders of one of the Yonko crews, is incredibly strong, and I would not be surprised if over the time skip has awakened his devil fruit power and awakened all forms of haki, which I also think, because I didn't bring it up earlier, I brought it up for Usopp, I didn't bring it up for Sanji. I think by this point in the story, Croc and Sanji will also be shown to have Conqueror's Haki. I think both of them could potentially have Conqueror's Haki, and we'll see that clash happening during Laugh Tale. And now, if you take that in consideration, Crocodile with advanced armament Haki, with an awakened Devil Fruit and Conqueror's Haki, bro, like, what more do you need, man? What more do you need? That would be fire. Now, I say fire, that brings up something else. The idea of melting sand to glass. We see this in all forms of fiction. I brought this up at C2E2 as well. Think back to the fight with Sandman and the Hobgoblin in Spider-Man, right? How do they end up beating Sandman? Super hot fire, explodes, turns the sand to glass, heats it up, turns it to glass, right? Now, no. Keep all that in mind, right? That if he's able, utilizing his hot flames, if Sanji's able to use his fire to find a way to beat Crocodile without utilizing water and instead breaking him, literally turning him to glass, that would be great. But also, think about Crocodile's theming in the story. Think about Crocodile and Sanji and their first confrontation during Alabasta. Sanji referring to himself as Mr. Prince. Us now knowing that Sanji is actually a prince of the Germa Kingdom. We know this now about Sanji. All of that coming full circle. The idea that Crocodile wants nothing more than power. He's always been power hungry. He has a lust for power. And what is Sanji's whole theme after everything we saw with Germa, after everything we saw in Wano country? Sanji wants nothing more than to renounce his power. He sees nothing good comes from power. He was literally crafted in a lab to be strong and doesn't want it, right? So the theming of somebody who wants nothing more than power versus somebody who wants to get rid of his power is also really good. The idea of feast versus famine, right? Crocodile doesn't care who he hurts, takes away the rain, creates droughts. People aren't actually able to eat, right? Taking away everything, literally taking away life. And Sanji wanting to feed everyone, right? You need rain. You need you can't just have sand and drought. Otherwise, people aren't going to have food. So Sanji and his ideal to want to feed everybody versus the famine aspect of Crocodile. Huge. Another massive, massive thing that people don't talk about enough in regards to Sanji and Crocodile and their relationships up into the story up until this point. Crocodile apparently has a secret that only Ivankov knows. Who did Sanji train with during the 2-year time skip? Ivankov, okay? They both have a history with Ivankov. The dichotomy of the feast versus famine, the melting of the glass with the sand powers, the wing of the Pirate King argument, the battle of the chain smokers, the awakened Crocodile actually being a good match for Sanji. The idea of desiring power versus renouncing power. There's too much here. I'm cooking like Sanji, bro, because this is going to happen. This is going to happen. Lock it in. Guaranteed. I've never been more sure of a theory. The only theory I've been more sure of in my life, was that Jack would have a mammoth devil fruit. And what happened? Jack got a mammoth devil fruit. Sanji is going to fight Crocodile. One and done. Even if it doesn't happen during Laugh Tale, which I think it will, it'll happen during Final War. It'll happen somewhere. Sanji and Crocodile will fight by the end of the series, and Sanji will beat Crocodile. And one last thing on top of all of this, okay? Because we stand Sanji and love Sanji. How good would it be, okay, if Sanji, and this came up during C2E2 actually, someone brought this up after I went on this giant rant about Sanji and Crocodile. Someone brought this theory up and I was like, oh my God, peak fiction, I love this. Sanji, right? Being a chef, feeding people. How poetic would it be? Also, the other thing, wait, real quick too. Also, Crocodile's weakness being water and Sanji wanting the all blue, the legendary sea with all the ingredients, the connection there. Anyway, the thing I was going to say, how sick would it be if Sanji melts Crocodile's sand into a bowl, or part of Crocodile's sand, obviously not Crocodile himself, but part of his sand. If he melts some of Crocodile's sand into a bowl or cookware or a cup and then feeds people with it, bro, the idea that Crocodile, right, taking stuff away and his lust for power and not caring who he hurts, literally being the thing that feeds people at the end of the story, bro, that's fire. That's fire. I love, no pun intended. That's so good. You can even use, I see somebody in the chat saying you could just use his hook as a cup, right? You turn his giant poison hook into a goblet and you pair it with the knife. Oh my God, dude. I loved it. I don't necessarily believe that as much as I believe my other stuff, but the idea that the melting of the sand into glass and potentially that glass becoming a plate or silverware or something is just too good. I love it. I absolutely positively love it. Or if he turns it, I see someone saying a fish tank for all the different ingredients from the all blue, any number of things. But again, I really do think Sanji Crocodile is the final fight. OTP right there, right? One true pairing. Those two are going to fight by the end of the series. Now, whoo, holy mackerel. All right, that was a lot of stuff. There's your final saga. Egghead Island, Elbaf, Final War, Laugh Tale. We've touched on everything that was in that chart an hour and a half ago, except for one thing that I want to bring up. Real small little minor thing, because I know people are going to bring it up, and that is the Emerald City, right? The Emerald City. I've seen a lot of people saying, when are we going to get to Emerald City? Now, Emerald City could be a number of things. Emerald City could actually be Burka. It could be the city on the moon that Eneru's at right now in the lead up to Elbaf. It could be that, right? It could be that. Emerald City could be the Ancient Kingdom. We don't know. Emerald City could be another island that sank to the bottom of the ocean after Emu wiped it off the face of the earth. It could be any number of things. It could easily fit into different places. However, there's actually a thing in the story that we've seen in terms of Nolan's Tales of an Emerald City that we know Nolan went to and is literally translated to the exact same thing in Japanese, and that is Greenbit. Okay, Greenbit, in the story, in Dressrosa, Greenbito is literally in Japanese emerald. It's the word for emerald. Okay, Greenbit Emerald, Emerald City. We know Nolan was there. The Gulliver's Travel thing, it was there. We know that. So we could have already seen the Emerald City, and that might not be something fleshed out. Now, it could very well be something else, but if Oda doesn't want to do the Emerald City stuff or doesn't have time for Emerald City stuff or doesn't want to flesh that out, you could slot it in saying it was Greenbit. You could make it the Void Century Kingdom or Ancient Kingdom or whatever. It could be any number of things. But the Emerald City is the one thing that I didn't touch on. Everything else pretty much got touched on. Everything. The only other actually, there's two. The other thing with the question mark was Davy back. The idea that if Shanks is actually in Elbaf or comes back to Elbaf in some way, that we could potentially see like a Davy back with the Straw Hats and Shanks' crew, which I think could be really cool. Or even at the end of Laugh Tale, Davy back and Davy Jones's rules and stuff coming into play for this fight against the Cross Guild and the Blackbeard Pirates. Like a Davy back to the end, I think would be really cool too. Or maybe even a Davy back during Final War. It could be any number of things. But I do think Davy back in some way is also going to come back, but I didn't really know where to slot that exactly. So I left that one off. But everything else we've touched on at this point. So now, all that leaves is one last thing. And that's the epilogue of the story. Now, I think that we're going to need to see something beyond when we find the One Piece. I know Oda said, when we find the One Piece, that's when the series ends. I don't fully believe him. I think we're probably also going to get some type of mini arc, post-war size potentially, or maybe even just a couple chapters of epilogue, in which we actually see these Straw Hats living out their dreams. We actually see the new Marines with Kobe and with Smoker and all the good Marines there in charge, where we actually see Vivi, run a new good world government made up of all of the Straw Hats' allies that allow the people to be free. Like all of this stuff, I think we're going to see during an epilogue. I think there's no way we don't see some type of epilogue. And the way that I think the epilogue is going to be done, I wouldn't mind if it's not done this way, but I was thinking about it and I'm like, oh my God, it's bringing me to tears almost thinking about it now. Brook obviously is going to outlive all the Straw Hats. He's the bard of the crew. He's the one sharing the stories. Imagine if the final chapter of One Piece is one long epilogue chapter and that the only text in the whole chapter are the lyrics to Bink's Sake. And as you see the lyrics across the screen, and those lyrics have now taken on a new meaning because of whatever we find out about the Void Century and the Sun God and Laugh Tale and everything, as those lyrics are going across the pages, you see all of the dreams of the Straw Hats having come true, right? You see Chopper curing every illness. You see Sanji fishing in the all blue. You see Zoro maybe training with the Samurai Wano as the world's greatest swordsman, being respected just like Ryuma was back in the day in Monster. You see Luffy as the Pirate King. You see everyone having achieved their dreams. And then at the end of all of it, you see the musical bars fade out and you see the bars being played by Brook. And that Brook, and Brook is playing the song of the Straw Hats, and the story of One Piece to Laboon in front of the graves of the Straw Hats. Like, what more needs to be said? That is like, especially because, you know, you have the One Piece and the Jolly Roger and the skull of the logo. Like, Brook's going to be the last one standing. Brook, having now lived his life with his crew, he got to live his life with his friends and now shares the story with everyone and tells the story of the sun god Nika and how he brought freedom and brought a new dawn to the world. Bro, man. Oh. And Bink Sake is playing throughout the entire thing. It's just so good. So good. I really do think the last of the dreams that we see is going to be Brook, and I really do think strongly that it's going to be Brook recounting the dreams of the Straw Hats having achieved their dreams to Laboon. That's what I think we're going to get. Because I don't think the reunion happens before that. I think maybe there's like an opportunity for Laboon to show up at Laugh Tale or something, or for... I don't think that's going to happen, though, to be fair. And I think even the stuff with like Reverse Mountain and the Final War, like maybe like Laboon shows up there, but doesn't have the opportunities to meet with Brook. And then you get a really like sad moment there where you think they're never going to reunite. Like, there's any number of ways they could take it. But Brook being the narrator of the story, like actually being the one to tell the story of the Straw Hats and sharing that message throughout the new generation that's living in a free world without the tyranny of the world government, too good. Way too good. Yeah. So I do think we're going to get an epilogue. I think it's going to focus on Brook. I think we're going to see the dreams of the Straw Hats. And that's that. And that takes us to the end. So ladies and gentlemen, 2 hours later, we are done. It's now open for Q&A, super chats. I'm going to go over the different super chats that happened earlier, all the other theories you guys had. That was a lot. Thank you for sticking with me. I know there was a lot of information that I threw at you. You probably have a lot of questions. Please, if you have any questions or comments on anything that I said, let me know down in the comments section below. Share with me your theories. Share with me your ideas, because really, I don't do One Piece theories that frequently anymore. Mostly because it's not as fun for me because we're at the end of the story. I feel like someone out there has probably already figured out everything. Where the One Piece is, what the One Piece is, who the final fights are going to be with, like everything. And so for me, it's just not as fun nowadays to speculate as it used to be in the days of like Dressrosa and Whole Cake. And so I sort of wanted to take this panel and take this opportunity to just share a whole bunch of my ideas for what I think are going to happen at the end of the story. And if you get anything out of this, I'm going to be super duper happy. Again, if this is the first time you're finding me and you found this at all interesting, make sure to hit the subscribe button, because I do One Piece chapter reactions every single Sunday alongside the official release. We react to One Piece games and shows, and I cover a bunch of other stuff too. But I wanted to throw that out there as well. Again, I really do think, going back to what I said at the very beginning, 2027, that's going to be where we're going to be near the end, or we're going to see the end in sight by 2027. But I think, without a doubt, we're getting to chapter 1200. Without a doubt, we're getting to the 30th anniversary. And without a doubt, Sanji's fighting Crocodile, bro. No two ways about it. So, okay. Let me go through some of these super chats now and talk to some of you guys. Thank you for sticking with me again. I know there was a lot of stuff. One of them, Mike Moore, came through and said, Roger with the slides. My schedule's been busy on my side lately, but I'm sending love and support. I'm hoping to run into you at Anime Expo or something sometime before 2027. I will be at EVO. I will be at Combo Breaker later this month. I will be at Summer Games Fest. I will probably be around Anime Expo, but I don't know exactly what I'm doing for Anime Expo yet. And that's it. That's it. Those 4 are the locks. Those are 4 things I'll be at. Those 4. Thank you, by the way. Mackerel donated and said, I actually disagree with you, Roger. Oda's 49 going on 50. It's 6 years from 2030 and 6 years till he turns 5'6". I think Oda's going to finish One Piece and retire as the true Gomu man and end the series at age 56. That'd be cool. I would like that. I would like if he ends it in 2030 at age 56. That'd be fine. I would be fine with that. And one other thing. Let's go back real quick. Wait. One other thing. I guess it would be under this. Right here, Final Saga. Going into Final Saga, I didn't mention this, but that reminded me. Thank you. Going into Final Saga, this is where we get final bounties for everybody. Because at this point, what would be the point of issuing out the bounties if we're having the final war? Leading into Final War is when we get everybody's final bounties. Right here. And I really, truly believe Luffy's final bounty is going to be 5656. Because what's Rogers again? Rogers' final bounty. Rogers' final One Piece. It's so specific that I'm like, oh, of course he's doing this so Luffy can have a higher one. Rogers' bounty at the time of his death was 5.5, okay? 5.5 billion. Of course, Luffy's going to be 5.6. Like, no doubt about it. Especially because it was 5.56 for Roger. I think it's going to be a flat 5.6 for Luffy. Just like Macro was saying with the Gomu thing, I feel very strongly 5.6 is going to be Luffy's. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Anyway, let's continue. Kawaku donated and said, I actually don't believe Croc is going to end up being a girl, but it would be hilarious if after Sanji defeats him, it actually turns out that he was a woman the entire time. That I didn't even bring that up, but I do think like that's also an interesting play on it of the idea that like Sanji would never hit a woman, and then you find out after the fight, like via Ivankov or something, that actually like Crocodile was a girl the whole time. And Sanji's like, no, well, that would be also kind of funny. That would actually be kind of funny. I would love that. I also don't believe the Croco Mom theory. I think it has more to do with like aging, with Crocodile being so heavily based on Peter Pan. Like I think, his name is literally Crocodile, the crocodile that eats Captain Hook and he wears Captain Hook's hook. Like there's a lot of Peter Pan theming there. But I've always kind of thought that Crocodile is sort of like the reverse Peter Pan, right? Like we knew that he went out to sea and he wanted to kill Whitebeard, but that almost like when he was a kid, he potentially aged himself up, or begged Ivankov to age him up, utilizing the hormones so that he could actually stand toe-to-toe against these other pirates and, take on Whitebeard. And that's why he has such a childish mindset. And that's why he's so focused on power, is because he's never really grown up, right? He still kind of has like the mind of a child a little bit. He's like a child pretending to be an adult. And that potentially could be his secret as well. I think that could be part of it. Yeah. But I think aging hormones is actually the Crocodile thing, with how many other ties he has to Peter Pan. But again, there's something in regards to Ivankov and the secret and Crocodile and Sanji and training with Ivankov. There's something there where those characters are going to fight for sure. Yeah, definitely. Heidi said, I really think Robin's bounty is going to be 800 million by the end, in reference to the Void Century. I love that. Lock it in. Lock it in. I love that. Final bounty going into Final War for Robin, 800 million. I love it. I love it. I love it. Love where your head's at, Heidi. Absolutely. Also, Clack says, was that the last trivia, by the way? Should I send you the winners? Please do. Yes, please do indeed. All right, let's click through this real quick. Let's go back to the Q&A page too. She's already over that now. I think it would go down. No, I think what Heidi is saying is that would be 1.800 million. I guess that should have been clarified, right? Because Robin's already over that at this point. It should be clarified. She meant specifically 1.8 billion. Let's clarify. I'm glad someone else brought that up, though. That's true. That's true. I think it's because I misspoke, too. That's my bad, Heidi. I'm sorry. Yeah, so 1.8 billion, exactly. Right. I think that covers it for Super Chats, which is perfect because we are now at like the 2-hour mark for this. And so I do want to open the floor to people in the comment section of this stream to drop their questions. And I'm going to make a point to answer as many of them as I possibly can, to comment on people's theories, to heart theories. I'm going to be super duper active in the live chat for this one. Or I should say in the comment section for this one. Obviously, the live chat was going on this entire time. Shout out to all the people, by the way, who came to the stream as I was doing this. I know this was a long one. I know I was ranting and raving. Hopefully it was fun for all of you. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope this was something that could give you your One Piece fix during our break week. Tomorrow I'm doing my stream with King Recon, but I really do hope that you guys enjoyed it. I got one last member message from Naruto Toad Sage, who said, I personally do hope that Buggy was secretly really powerful the entire time and played us all for clowns, and that he did survive on Roger's crew after all, and that we actually get like a real fight with Buggy. Again, I think the way I lined it up with Laugh Tale and like Buggy having like a play fight with Luffy that's just super Looney Tunes, super goofy before the actual final fights of the series that allows Buggy to go off and slink off and actually find the One Piece first, but not actually know what the hell to do with it, is probably where I see his story going. But this was super fun. Thank you all for listening to this full 2-hour-long live stream. Hope you guys had fun. If you did, leave a like. Make sure you're subscribed. I'll be back next Sunday with another One Piece chapter. Like, comment, subscribe. And until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. All right, bye-bye, everybody. Nakam!